Revolutionary greetings, comrades. Let us discuss politics. Yesterday, we spent time discussing the issue of documentation. But today, we need to discuss politics briefly. We have said that our task, this generation, is to push back expansion of imperialism in our country. And we have said that Zanu PF was created as a stooge of imperialist forces. We further said that in rebuilding our economy, we must remove Zanu PF from power. It becomes our first step in rebuilding the economy. Zanu PF is going to gather in its annual conference in Bulawayo from the 22nd of October. Their annual conference is meant to review the work that the government did in 2024 and a plan for 2025. But you'll agree with me that Zanu PF has not achieved anything in 2024. We all see how the ZiG currency is performing. We all see poverty in our communities in Zimbabwe. We see how it has reversed the land reform program. So there's nothing that Zanu PF has achieved to better the lives of the majority. And therefore, our task is to remove Zanu PF from power. And we are not apologetic about this. It's a task that we must carry out. But as we say that there's no one who's going to remove Zanu PF from power for us, we must ourselves to do so. It means therefore that we must finance our own struggle. There's this tendency which is now dominating. It's a tendency that we have inherited in the last 20 years or so. That the moment we register a political party, the first thing that we do is to write proposals to Western embassies to ask for funding. To say, we formed a political party, a political movement, this is the constitution, this is what we seek to do. We request you to fund our political programs. We're saying, let's come up with a better strategy. Because when you ask money from Western donors, you are controlled by them. Anyone who gives you money controls you. And in the process, you alienate yourself from the progressive forces globally, as was the case with the MDC. Comrade Dube Tembelana, I hope Mom says, then Mr. Mapena, what's the way forward pertaining our plea in this foreign land? How best can we liberate ourselves from the junta? We need to organize ourselves. And this is part of what we are addressing. Because as I'm saying, when we establish a political party or a political movement, we then write proposals to Western governments through their embassies in Harare, asking them to fund our political activities. We become their puppets. In the process, we alienate ourselves from Pan-Africanists. We alienate ourselves from progressive forces. The progressive forces turn a blind eye when Zanu PF rig elections. Let me give you an example, something which practically happened. As you know, that I was part of the MDC. So in 2002, we went for presidential elections, which we all believed that the MDC won those elections. Comrade Lisamkuni says, when uthunywa izanu ikukhuluma so. Assuming you are correct, Comrade Lisamkuni. Let's assume for a moment that you are correct, that ngithunywa izanu. ZANU will never want anyone to mobilize against it. Let's assume you are correct. Right? ZANU will never agree that social media should be used to mobilize against it. Remember what happened in Tunis in 2011, what is called Arab Springs. Something that we are here to talk about. Because part of the challenge that we have is how do we mobilize ourselves using social media as they did in 2011. We saw what happened in Kenya recently. Of course, the president of Kenya did not go. But we saw what happened when they rejected the bill in Kenya. They used the social media. So, Comrade Lisamkuni to say, no, it will not want anyone to mobilize against it through social media. But let me get to this point. So, in 2002, we believed that Morgan Tsvangirai won the elections. So we began to carry out an international campaign, a rerun of the elections in 2002, because we believed with the evidence that we had and in the build-up to the elections, that the elections were not held in a free and a fair environment, and that Zanu PF was rejected by the people of Zimbabwe. And we were demanding a rerun of the 2002 elections. So I was part of the people that then met with the Tanzanian diplomats in Pretoria. It was Tanzanian diplomats and some comrades from the ruling party in Tanzania. So we had this discussion. In the middle of this discussion, they cited two things. The issue of being puppet, and of course the issue of principled leadership, which then links to the ethnic question. They said to us, we know that elections were rigged in Zimbabwe. Would want to support you to have a rerun. But the problem we have, these were the Tanzanians. Some from Chama Punzi, the ruling party in Tanzania, and some diplomats based in Pretoria from Tanzania. They were saying to us, we know that Zanu PF rigged elections. But the problem is, Tony Blair and Morgan Tsvangirai, we believe they entered into a secret agreement. And they will not support the opposition if Tsvangirai is the presidential candidate. Because the Tanzanians said they believed that Tsvangirai and Tony Blair had entered into a secret agreement and they cannot support a government which is influenced by Britain. Right? Why did they say that? Because when the MDC was formed, it was formed at a time when there was this chaotic land reform program. Commercial farmers supported the MDC in solidarity with the commercial farmers. The international community, the United States and Britain, supported the MDC. So on those bases, we then alienated ourselves as the MDC from the progressive forces, and they turned a blind eye on what Zanu PF was doing to the opposition, because they took a position to say, we would rather have a reformed Zanu PF in Zimbabwe than an MDC government. And you recall to what happened in Victoria Falls, that was in 2001. Again, you remember the Consul General, Zimbabwean Consul General in South Africa, who had been designated to be the ambassador to Mozambique. You remember also Philip Chiangwa when he was arrested. Because the argument was that President Mbeki and the others were trying to reform Zanu PF from within. And the then Consul General, Zimbabwe Consul General to South Africa, was now designated to be ambassador in Mozambique. They were spying on Zanu PF to reform Zanu PF from within and remove Mugabe as the president. You also remember at Stellenbosch, at the ANC conference in 2002 December, when Emerson Mnangagwa was paraded at the ANC conference as the prince, as the political prince in Zimbabwe. So there were kind of what one would call activism or activities that were taking place to say, instead of supporting the MDC, which in their view was a Western puppet, they then designed a program to reform Zanu PF from within. But as I said in the last video, that you cannot reform Zanu PF, and that failed. It is only the military that later removed Mugabe in 2017. So what we are saying is, the issue of establishing a political party or a political movement, then write proposals asking Western embassies in Harare to fund our political activities, alienates us from the progressive forces. So the question is, what then must be done? We must therefore finance our own political activities in Zimbabwe. We are workers. We work in Zimbabwe. We work in the diaspora. Some are running businesses in Zimbabwe. Some are running businesses in the diaspora. We need to organize ourselves and establish a fund. When we talk of establishing a fund, I saw some comments. It's not about myself as Comrade Mapema being the chairman of that fund, treasurer of that fund. No. What we want is that, in principle, let us establish the fund, a political fund, to support our political activism in Zimbabwe. What is this fund for? What is it that being financed? I've said that there are many ways or strategies that you can employ in removing Zanu PF from power. The first one is through a democratic election. If you are going to an election, if you observed the last elections in 2023, to register as a parliamentary candidate, you needed to deposit to ZEC, that is the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, $1,000. As a council candidate, $100. A member of parliament, $1,000. A presidential candidate, I think it was $20,000. Right. So if in the next coming elections, I would want to stand, say I want to stand as a presidential candidate, it means I have to fork out 20,000 rands. If I want to stand as a parliamentary candidate, I have to fork out $1,000. If you want to stand as a presidential candidate, if you want to stand as a parliamentary candidate, this is the money that you have to pay. What then does this mean? Which we saw in Triple C. This means that if a person fundraises money on their own, these people can be easily bought. Zanu PF can easily give money to some individuals to run on the opposition ticket, either as presidential or parliamentary candidates. Zanu PF is capable of doing that because the opposition does not have money. If the opposition writes to the embassies, it alienates itself from progressive forces. If it does not do so, it will not have money to field its own candidates. Then in communities, Zanu PF appoints or select certain individuals who will then stand on the ticket of the opposition because they've got money to register. As a result, you have an opposition, which is Zanu PF itself, not a genuine opposition for the people of Zimbabwe. So it is important, therefore, that we must, as the mass of the people of Zimbabwe, begin to own our struggle. A struggle cannot be owned by individuals. A struggle must be owned by the collective. Right? I was a kid during the struggle for national liberation in the late 70s. Okoko babe contributor makoron, you know koron, that coin, elembobo. They were contributing. Amatunsigis to Zap, they were contributing. I grew up in the village. Right? They were financing the struggle. They were giving they were giving food to the guerrillas, both the Zebra and the Zanu. It was the villagers that were doing that. So not everyone could cross and go and train as a guerrilla. Some, during the struggle for national liberation, their task was to ensure that the guerrillas had proper clothing uniform. Right? They would go to the city to purchase uniform for the guerrillas, amajini and the other clothing material. They would go and purchase armor boots and give to the guerrillas using the money collected from the community. Because they understood that not everyone will go to the Soviet Union, will go to Zambia, will go to Mozambique, to China, and they train as a guerrilla. Just like not everyone today can be on the ground. Some watching here, they are in the United States of America, some they are in Europe, some are in South Africa. People cannot, all of us, we cannot be on the ground. But our money can make a difference. Right? Our money can support the struggle inside Zimbabwe. So I've said, if we are committed, all of us, to say we want to remove Zanu PF through a democratic election, it means we must invest financially in the election. We must not have a polling station that does not have polling agents because there's no money to pay them. So this is what your money does. If we decide as a collective that we must embark on civil disobedience, we must organize boycotts. You remember the boycotts that were organized in the late 90s, 1997, 1998 by the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions. If we organize stairways, we saw what happened in 2019. We know that the regime is ruthless. It is going to descend heavily on the organizers. Some people are going to be arrested. Right? We will need to bail them out. We will need to engage lawyers. We will need to organize safe houses for some of our leaders. We will need to support their kids when they are in prison. Remember the time that Job Zikala spent in prison. Remember the MRP 9. They spent 3 years in prison. Who was taking care of their families. Right? So this is what the money is supposed to be doing, because you cannot, if we are honest and committed to the struggle, we cannot organize boycotts. Then the people that are on the ground get arrested. When they get arrested, we don't pay school fees for their children. It means we are just playing. We are setting up others for failure. So this is why I'm saying, let us think deep about this question. That if all of us want Zanu PF to go, we must establish a fund. But I'm not saying let us establish a fund today. Right? The fund must be established once we've agreed on what vehicle to use. Because I don't want to say, firstly, we must agree on the vehicle that we must use to remove Zanu PF. In other words, we must agree on the political movement that we must have, that all of us will rally behind. And it becomes our revolutionary duty to own that movement. Ogogo wami ayesithi izaphu ngeyabo. Izaphu yangasoka inkomo according to ogogo emakhaya. Yayingeyabo. This is why ogogo babekhipha amakoroni, babekhipha amathunsikisi ababewaqhiyele befinance istruggle. This is why sasikhwela intaba sihambisa ukudla egangeni, because abadala they believed ukuthi they owned the struggle. But today, as I'm concluding, we have a serious problem. A serious problem where there's no longer sacrifice. And this problem it comes from us, the leadership. We abuse donor money, right? It has happened that people have abused the donor money. People that have never worked anywhere are now rich. They've never been in parliament. They've never been in government. They've never worked for anyone, but they are now rich because of donor money. These are the things that we must correct. Second, because of that, activists now want to be paid to participate in political activities. If you call a meeting in the Harare CBD, comrades coming from Mbari, they want to be given food, they want to be given money for transport, they want to be given airtime. We are commercializing this drug. And our message, which I'm delivering to you, is that we must rethink our strategies. We must begin to say it is our collective responsibility that we remove Zanu PF from power. It is not the responsibility of Comrade Mabena. It is not the responsibility of Advocate Nelson Chamisa. It is not the responsibility of Job Zikala. It is our responsibility as a collective. It is not the responsibility of Comrade Mkondi Zimoy. It's our responsibility as a collective. It is not the responsibility of Comrade Spangli Zongo. It is our responsibility as the people of Zimbabwe to remove Zanu PF from power if we are to rebuild our economy. And this means that we must firstly agree on the vehicle, the movement that we should use. Secondly, we must take responsibility and finance the movement. Please write in the comment section. Thank you so much for joining. Let's continue to have this conversation. Otherwise, Amandla comrades.